No End House has all the makings of a good spooky story, interesting premise, nice build-up, and a twist, and stupid sequels, and a damn fine adaptation on the Sci-Fi Network. No End House follows a protagonist named David. David gets a message from his drifter friend Peter about a mysterious attraction called the No End House. If you make it through all the rooms, you win $500. David thinks it'll be easy, but after getting through a few rooms, he realizes this ain't no normal house. This is a No End House, son. Every subsequent room presents a new existential nightmare scenario, from a little girl demon thing, to a vision of his parents dead on the floor, to a clone of himself that he has to kill. The twist at the end implies either he's still in the house, or he saw the number on his door and is so scarred by the house, he thought he was still inside. I think it's a fine horror story. The author ups the ante pretty well with the different rooms. The first line is a little silly. Let me start by saying that Peter Terry was addicted to heroin. It sets off the plot, but it's way too attention grabby. It's like in elementary school when they tell you to always begin your stories with an onomatopoeia. What was up with that? There are a couple of sequels written by the same author. No End House 2 kinda went in one ear, out the other. David's girlfriend Maggie goes to the house to try and get him back, but ends up going through a bunch of trials similar to the original. It's revealed at the end that the Peter character is behind the whole thing, or is somehow controlling the house. My assumption based on the ending of this one is that because he got trapped in there before the events of No End 1, he became the house's guardian of some sort, and that's what happens to Maggie at the end of this one. But then in No End House 3, David goes back and he finds out that Peter and this other lady are like a family of witches or cultists who run the house, and there's a twist where the new lady tries to help David, but she only wants to take over the house. Why is there lore? Writing style throughout the sequels isn't bad, but the characters and scenarios get less and less interesting. There's only so many times you can read about someone having to cut a hole in someone else to advance. It would be cool to do an anthology thing, where each new story follows different characters who have their own baggage and the house makes them confront their fears. That's sort of what happens in the TV adaptation, but it's more its own thing. Speaking of which, the Channel Zero No End House miniseries makes the original stories look like scribblings on a public bathroom stall. I seriously recommend this one. If you don't want spoilers, click off now. For those who don't know, Channel Zero is a show on the Sci-Fi Network that took different creepypasta stories and adapted them into 6-episode miniseries. Last year I talked about the Candle Cove miniseries from season 1. I thought it was weird how loose of an adaptation it was, but the mystery had me hooked at certain points. It was really well put together. Season 2, No End House, is genuinely great television. The first episode follows the story up to a point with some major changes. Main character Margot, her friend Jules, other friend Ezra Miller, and some new guy who just moved to town all meet up at a party. Sometime later, they all go over to the No End House, which in the show is this Omega Mart-esque art installation for hip college kids. The first 2 rooms are a little weird, a very impressive illusion in the lobby, and an encounter with MF Doom. But then it starts projecting people's memories onto the wall, and finally plops them in this infinite suburb. Margot and Jules don't realize they aren't in Kansas anymore, but Margot thinks it's a little weird that her dead dad is somehow alive after watching him pass a year ago. Turns out they're still in the house. Her dad is this weird clone that feeds on her memories, and everyone besides the main characters and some random guy who tags along. It goes how you'd expect. The dad starts chasing her, trying to get at her memories, and all our human characters have to find a way out and escape the clones. But then there's a twist at the end, where the dad comes into the real world. Suddenly, it takes a sharp twist from what you'd expect in the last 2 episodes. The epilogue has him and Margot living in the No End House with New Kid, Margot giving up her memories so that she can keep her dad alive. New Kid, I think his name was Josh, I forget. He's this guy who has a symbiotic relationship with the house. He's a kid who never had a family, so he lives in the infinite suburb, so he can have all the people he wants keep him company. And that's bad because he's basically been sacrificing people to the house so that he can have friends. Margot finds out that if she stays, she'll lose all her memories and turn into a lifeless husk, and only then escapes. I sound very frantic describing this whole thing, but that's because the reveals in the show are so amazing. It eliminated the problem I had with Candle Cove, where the mystery winds down in the end and you get some boring, uninspired climax. Down to the last episode, there's something to keep you invested, and the twists and turns are so well done. I was glued to my screen wondering what would happen to all the characters. What helps the mystery is all the visuals. I can tell the writers have a thing for abstract body horror adjacent scenarios, episodes. The way the clones feed on people's memories is so unique. They touch the real person's head, and then a physical representation of that memory rises up from the floor in this weird goop, and then they eat it, and the memories are these pomegranate seeds that are inside the body. The core of the house is like a weird egg with people inside. You see these bizarre things, and your mind is set ablaze, I tell you. I was very surprised with how it subverted my expectations. At the end of the 4th episode, I thought I knew where it was going with the clones, but they don't take the easy way out and make the dad a mindless zombie. He acts like a rational human being would, if said rational human being's food source was memories. And there are a lot of sweet moments between him and Margot. Complaints: I think it's a little unfocused with regards to other characters. The Ezra Miller kid gets got by his clone, and then the clone is unceremoniously set on fire by Backpack Guy and forgotten about entirely. Backpack Guy also disappears from the story after they leave the house. They never resolve that plot line with him and his wife. Even though the stuff with Margot, Dad, and New Kid is great, the series gives you the impression there's going to be an ensemble cast, but that's not how it turns out. It barely follows the original story, but that's a good thing. The series is so unique in its story and presentation. It makes the story of a guy going through a scary hell house seem so dull in comparison. Obviously, the whole infinite suburb thing was taken from the first, and I like to think the New Kid being in cahoots with the house was their version of the Peter twist. I know I've spoiled all the twists for the series, so maybe check out the other seasons. I know I will. I joked about this last year, but after watching No End House, I genuinely would have loved to see what this team could have done with a subpar pasta, like Jeff the Killer and Friends, or Mr. Widemouth. If they can make 2 crappy Rake movies, then why not let the people who know what they're doing make the Rake show?